Strike Elite Stryfe can never die. It's one of the best blasters that Hasbro has ever produced for the NERF line, and if you don't believe me, just look at the community outlash whenever it becomes hard to find one. Everybody wants a Stryfe. Everybody always needs a Stryfe. Most people need multiple Stryfes. And because of this, it's become one of the most modded blasters in the entirety of NERF history, and that's no joke. Thankfully, just recently we got ourselves the brand new Battle Camo Stryfe, and we have the modular Stryfe that you can pick up off Amazon and some orange Stryfes floating around every which way, which means that hopefully for the near future we'll still be able to get this wonderful blaster and tinker with it, because, well, it's a relatively simple blaster to modify. You essentially just need 2 motors, 3 things of wire, and 1 switch in order to upgrade this thing whatever way you want. And of course there's select fire kits and full auto kits and completely different cosmetic kits to make the blaster look like pretty much anything you could possibly want, and that's not even touching on the homegrown territory of being able to mod one yourself by integrating it with a whole variety of different blasters. The Stryfe is kind of a big deal for such a small, fully functional, semi-auto NERF pistol. I mean, if you look at the base blaster, it's got an N-Strike rail attachment point, it's got an N-Strike muzzle attachment point, and a stock attachment point, which means this pistol has always dreamed big. Although I'm not sure if it ever dreamed of becoming something like this. This is a cosmetic kit from 3D DH and NF Stryfe that turns your humble Stryfe Nerf blaster into a FAMAS? I mean, it's kind of like, it doesn't really look like a real gun, but at the same time it looks kind of like a FAMAS. It's a bullpup, which is always cool. I happen to be a big fan of bullpups, and I'm sure a lot of you are as well, because everybody loves the Raven. But this is something that turns a much more upgradable blaster into a much more comfortable package, and that's about all it does. This kit is not meant to make your Stryfe hit harder. It's not really meant to make your Stryfe do anything other than look cool. So if this doesn't appeal to you, then, well, this entire video is almost pointless to you, because that's all this does. I mean, there are modifications done to the Stryfe to make it better, but the kit itself that I am reviewing from NF Stryfe is just that. It is this piece of plastic up in the front that weighs more than the Stryfe itself, and then some bits and bobs back here to give it a stock and fill in some of the gaps to make it look like one coherent piece of kit. And to be perfectly honest, I absolutely love it. That's not to say it doesn't have its flaws, because it definitely has some flaws. But this is one of those 3D printed kits that, of course, I'm a big fan of. I did do the TAR 21 kit from XSW recently, and I got this shortly after that, and there are some major differences that could lead you to choosing one kit over the other. And to be perfectly honest, while the printing quality of this is nowhere near the quality of that XSW kit, it makes up for it by being much, much cooler looking, by having a lot more design choices thrown into it, and again, just cooler looking. I can't get past that. This thing looks amazing. I think it's one of the, like, this could be a Hasbro blaster. If they can make the Hero Shot replica from Splatoon 2 look like a P90, then I think they can get away with releasing a blaster that looks like this, and I'm honestly not sure why they don't. This kit retails anywhere from about $90 to about $120, and all you get are the 3D printed pieces. That means if you're going to buy this kit, you have to have 2 additional things. You need to have a long piece of arrow that can go from your flywheel cage to the end of the blaster. Without that, your darts aren't going to go anywhere. And then you're also going to need some kind of electronical firing system. In this case, a cheap full auto kit that I can stuff in here that can be controlled by the trigger up front. And there is only one trigger on this entire blaster, so pulling the trigger slowly will rev the flywheels. Pulling it all the way will not only rev the flywheels, but also fire the blaster. An interesting system. I've done this personally through actual, like, hardcore modding on other blasters like my Thompson submachine gun. This one is a far better design because they had a lot more room to work with, but there's essentially 2 micro switches in here. When you pull the trigger, it releases one of the micro switches, which starts the flywheel, and then when you pull it all the way back, it presses in a micro switch, which fires the blaster, which is something I've never even thought of before, but works really well on this system and gives you some good ideas on how to mod things in the future. Quite happy with how they did that. And overall, the color separation on this thing is phenomenal. It has lots of different colors built into it, lots of details. If you wanted to paint this thing, it all comes apart I would say almost relatively effortlessly, but it's still pretty hard to pull this thing apart for the first time, just trying to figure out where everything is, kind of like some kind of puzzle. But there are lots of things that you can do with just the shell itself if you want to paint it or hydro dip it and stuff like that. But the print quality needs to be mentioned. For the most part, it's actually pretty freaking good. And then there's this white, which you can probably see on camera, is very subpar. It's way under what my printer at home can do, let alone what a company charging, you know, like $100-something for a kit can do. It's not so bad that it ruins the entire blaster, because it is perfectly functional. It's just, it's very noticeable. I don't mind it because at least it's somewhat like a pattern, it's symmetrical, it's not like something that really super bothers me all that much, but it is something to mention that the print quality, at least on the white, is distractingly bad. That's about all I would have to say about the negatives, but there's one other one, and that's I had to take this entire kit apart because when I originally wired it up, even though the wires were nicely shown like what they were gonna be, they were handwritten and designated from the factory, the flywheels did not rev and the auto pusher was automatically running, which did not work at all. So doing what I did with the XSW TAR-21 kit, I took the entire thing apart and completely resoldered it and turned it into two different mechanisms, which I don't know why it wasn't done like that from the beginning, because you have to, there's no way for me to rev the blaster without doing that anyway. Like, there's no worries about me having to, like, firing the blaster without revving it because the way the triggers are designed. So I don't know if it was something on my end, most likely, or something on their end, also likely, but it did require me to put a little bit of effort into completely unsoldering and turning this thing into two different circuits. Once that's done, it worked perfectly fine, but it was kind of annoying because I thought what would be a 30-minute install turned into about 4 hours. Not fun. But once I got it together, there's some things that I like about it over the TAR-21 kit, believe it or not. While the TAR-21 kit is very, very comfortable, it is much thicker than this blaster, incredibly so. This is way more streamlined and much better, in my opinion. It just looks a lot cooler, even though it shows off more of the Stryfe. While I love the TAR-21 kit for how comfortable it is, and this does have some minor comfort gripes, like the fact it doesn't have any kind of foregrip on here, you would have to put something or just, you know, rest your hand on a rail, and there's this little part back here where it conjoins to the front of the Stryfe that kind of digs into the back of my thumb. It's still very, very pointable and very nice, and the stock is extremely comfortable, not in a point where it's so thick, but just in the fact that it just sits really well against my shoulder. Overall, I like the look of this kit, and I can get past the minor ergonomic problems I have because it just looks so good. And if you buy a kit like this, all you would want is for it to look good. That was not a joke that I said that the front of this blaster weighs more than the actual Stryfe that I put it on. There's a lot of 3D printed material on this, and it's all put together in a very nice way. But that's all this is. It's not gonna make your blaster hit harder. You will have to open up your blaster. You will most likely have to do the same rewire I did, unless that's something that only came from my version of this kit and not yours. But it's not something that's just going to make your Stryfe magically better. Well, unless you think cosmetics and bullpup is cooler, which I personally do. I do have another gripe about this kit, a pretty major one. When I saw it on their website, it has a little switch on the side of it that looks like it goes from semi-auto to full auto. There's no such thing built into this blaster. In fact, even if you take it apart, there's no way for you to make this switch do anything. It is literally a piece of plastic, and it could be effortlessly removed, except for the fact that, well, if you remove it, you still have the weird little markings here and then a hole where that used to be, so I'm actually kind of upset about that. I kind of wish they would have tried to at least even add a cavity for this thing to manipulate some kind of switch in there, or maybe they had plans to make some kind of select fire kit for this in the future, but that is not the case. And keep in mind that the way this thing works, there's really no way for you to make it work with the V6 select fire kit, because that requires the trigger to actually integrate with the circuit board and push some very tiny micro switches. This can't do that. You're pretty much just stuck using the full auto kits and a variety of ones that you can fit in a Stryfe. I'm personally using the XSW kit because it was pretty much already in the Stryfe, but of course you can use the Hammerhead or the new Worker kit or even some other 3D printed kit you find online. There's a lot of ways that you can make this thing work however you would want, as long as it's not like super crazy, although the V3.8 kit should still work in this no problem. And that's because you still have access to the jam door, something that most of these kits don't let you do, which is impressive. Not that it really matters all that much, because if you do have a jam, you can pull out the magazine and fish your finger in there and kind of clear anything you would have a problem with, but this also lets you put other stuff on your blaster, like that Select Fire kit, that you normally can't do with something that blocks the jam door. So I happen to be a big fan of that, and the overall aesthetics really sing to me. This is not a kit for somebody who doesn't really know the ins and outs of a Stryfe, although I would say that it is a good starter point if you're wanting to get into modding a Stryfe, because even though I had to add in the full auto kit and rewire everything, it is again just a very simple 2-circuit setup. The front switch that controls the flywheels goes from battery to flywheels to switch back to battery. Really, really simple. Same thing with the firing. It goes from battery to fire, full auto kit, goes from battery to full auto kit to switch back to battery. Really, really simple die. I don't even have to, that's it. That's all you have to do. There is a little bit of a challenge fitting some wire in here, but thankfully all the wire goes through this little black piece down here, which means it's really easy for you to just kind of stuff it wherever you need to in the very bottom of the Stryfe. So, a very easy setup for somebody who wants to mod a Stryfe and get into it and doesn't want to deal with anything too crazy, plus you wind up with something that looks like this. As for what I personally have in this, of course, I do have the XSW kit. I do have a Worker flywheel cage with Worker wheels, a straight cage running Fang revamps in it. It hits okay, it hits pretty okay hard. It's not anything super crazy. It was just enough to get this thing functional, and it keeps it around 130, which is perfect for, well, I have so many other Stryfes that hit so much harder, so it would be nice to have something that's a little bit safe. But you have to understand, this massive barrel right here is definitely going to kill some performance, so if you want this thing to hit a certain number, you're gonna have to kind of overkill it for it to hit that number. I'm just a big fan. It's not perfect, it's not nearly as comfortable as the XSW TAR 21 kit, but overall, visually, I think this thing looks way better. It's busier, which could be a con against it, but in my opinion, I think this works a heck of a lot better, in my opinion. Is it nearly as good of a deal? Nah, not really, because the XSW kit, you do at least get the full auto pusher, and you will get the barrel. This one, you have to buy those things kind of separately. But if you were already planning on doing a different pusher, well, you don't have to worry about having just a spare pusher you don't need and stuff. You can save yourself a couple of bucks, and I personally think this looks better, although it's not nearly as comfortable, so take that at what you will. If you're interested in this one, it does come in a variety of colors, including black and, of course, the orange Stryfe. There'll be links down in the description box below where you can pick one up from NF Stryfe. I do want to thank NF Stryfe once again for sending this off to me for review, because it's a really cool kit, and I plan on keeping this one together. But let me know what you think about it down in the comment section below. And, of course, if you have any questions about how to build this thing up or what kind of parts to use, I'd be happy to help, so just let me know. Other than that, I'm Walcom S7. Thank you very much for watching this video, and, of course, I hope to see you in an entirely different one.
You gotta